Hello, good morning. Uh, what a dreadful weekend I've had. I say that with some reservations. You know, some of you who watched my videos last week would realize that I was talking about situations here in the Philippines where we can find ourselves quite easily embroiled in controversy. And when I say controversy, I mean one that is within. In other words, within the area you're living, your home, your environment, or maybe you're just your immediate family. And I've discovered a lot about myself and those around me. And I'd like to share some of that without being disrespectful to anybody involved, but trying to maybe tell the story without actually mentioning names. I think you'll have to bear with me there. Let's talk hypothetically. It's maybe safer. Well, hypothetically, you can have a mother, a daughter, a son, grandchildren, all living in the same house. Sometimes you just have a grandmother and maybe a grandson or a granddaughter. But inevitably, they're all part of the same family, extended. Some live and work in the environment around you, in the local town and the neighborhood, the barangay. And some, unfortunately, work overseas. And the trouble with working overseas is twofold. We've all heard of foreigners taking their wives or their girlfriends to go and live with them overseas. And we've had all sorts of different stories and situations, scenarios, where the lady becomes what we would call westernized. In other words, they start to adopt the characteristics of those around them. And hypothetically speaking, you could actually have a daughter or a son who are doing that as part of your own extended family or new family or your existing family. And that's fine. But then now and again they'll return home, maybe for birthdays or anniversary times, or just simply their time to return to the Philippines. There's always this feeling of excitement, I'm sure, within the family that so-and-so is returning home. And of course, if you're the new man on the block, so to speak, the foreigner now living with their mother, you can, and I say you can, find yourself in hot water, sticky water, in an uncomfortable position. And I found myself in that recently, back off hypothetically. And one has just played it by ear. We've been flying loose, so to speak. And it's not been a very comfortable ride. About 3 days into the so-called arrival, I was confronted by a very irate, angry, self-opinionated maybe from my perspective, but maybe justified from her point of view, where she came and asked me, no, sorry, she told me, how dare you leave a coffee cup on the table for somebody else to pick up and clean? Of course, I can sell my side, and that was that I was having a cup of tea, coffee, no problem. But I intended after I downloaded a video to go back and make myself another one, which having thought about it, I might have one soon, maybe when I finish the video. But that was the catalyst that broke the camel's back from her point of view. A 40-something plus lady been overseas for 5 years, had some good opportunities and good jobs. But unfortunately, she came back and decided that she'd seen enough of Mum cooking for me, washing for me, driving me everywhere, as she described. I have my own driver now. And that's not quite the case. I've been living here since January, early February, and with a very kind and very gentle lady, her mother. And her walking in was like a tornado. There was no sort of handshake or any kind of major greeting from her. It was just like, a few conversations across the dining room table. At meal times, very strained, very defensive on her part. And I suppose other things that she just didn't get the sense of humour. One of them was the idea that if I was to die here, I would be joining the others in the cemetery. Oh, no way, she said. And I also understand what she's talking about. After all, we are not family. But since her departure overseas again, for a short period of time, a holiday away with her son, who lives here permanently, as I have been doing, life has returned to somewhat normal. But prior to that, I felt it were best to stay out of sight, avoid too much conversation, because clearly there was no love lost between the two of us. And I've done that, but after a while it does become somewhat overpowering and maybe a little hard to deal with. And I will put my hand up and suggest that it became unbearable. So much so that when I was then further approached by a changed mother, and maybe through lack of truer understanding of conversation, either by me or her, I decided to call her bluff when she said, well, this is the mother. She said, well, maybe you're better off back where you came from. So I said, well, if that's the case, maybe you should pack my stuff. Again, calling her bluff. But as we are, sometimes when we feel we've been insulted, when we've been attacked, maybe unnecessarily, we also lose face and we also feel under attack. And the best way to avoid further dispute is to remove oneself for a period of time. So, suitcase packed, tools in packed, everything in my hand, very heavy cases. I was escorted, dropped off at the local depot where they take you to Dow, which is near Angeles City, to then catch a bus back to the home that I built. The one that everybody suggested I was kicked out of, that I left because of, again, unacceptable situations that I found myself in. I've spent the last 6-7 months trying to sort out my visa situation. Thank God it's now all sorted. And I suppose it was a bit under the auspices of having a plan B always is a good thing. For those that have built a home, cut off all ties with their family back in the States, Australia or New Zealand, England, one can find yourself in a situation where you're forced to say, right, do I go to a hotel and start trying to get my head bound, living on my own again, trying to sort out my life here, or do I just buy a one-way ticket home? Fortunately, I'm in that financial position to be able to do that, but for many of us, we are not able to necessarily even consider that. So Plan B seemed the best option for me, as much as it was maybe a little inflammatory, given the fact that Filipinos get very jealous. And they're also very stubborn. And I won't say they're childish, because I've learned a different word. It's called, they act rather juvenile. True, sometimes I do too. But two wrongs. I'm having to stop the video from disappearing periodically. Don't know why it does that, but never mind, we'll carry on. But I got on the bus. Again, you're forced to pay for more seats than you probably had to in the van taking you to Dao, just so you're not left hanging there for 2 hours till they fill the van up. So it cost you a lot more money to would otherwise be paying $130. I ended up paying $1,450 to get myself to Dao, because I was paying for an extra 11 people who weren't in the van. Of course, the others waiting were quite happy that they didn't have to such a long wait. They were on their way with me to Dao. When I got to Dao, it's 353 pesos to Boong in La Union, which is about 15 minutes tricycle drive to the house I built. When I returned, why do you always come without telling us? Well, I'm sorry, I never plan anything. I never, apart from saying, well, I'm on the bus again. That's about as courteous as I can be. Because nobody knows when things will go asked about face. And they can so easily here. A wrong word. And guys, here's another little snippet that will help you maybe not find your way into every argument. Sometimes we get annoyed with people and they behave in a very juvenile way. And maybe not thinking quite so deeply. I dared to use the word bitch. Wasn't received very well. In fact, almost mortified was the reaction. And it became the central issue in her mind. That was it. That's what broke the camel's back. But I felt, what about the mother? Surely the mother has the ultimate choice of who she has living here with her, not an absentee child, or should I say, child. Whether they're old or not, they always remain our children. And once the words had been spoken, it became hotter and more verbally violent, to the point where I said, oh, so would you like me just to go? I think she did say yes, but I let it flow across. I said, well, at least in so many days you'll be back to England, and that will be great. So when you go, that will be fine. But of course it's turned around that I said that she should go. Two ends against the middle, somebody trying to avoid conflict, the mother. Naturally, she's going to take sides, or certainly appear to, with her daughter to try and calm things down. But since that, they've gone around as a family, the three of them, and I assume have had a good time, reacquainting themselves with each other, which I'm only too pleased to see happen. But being not maybe so mature in her own outlook, she has chosen to stand firm and totally dislike me. And that can be hard, because it also points to my future. Everything that her mother might choose to do with me is under question by an uninvolved party to my romance, to my future. And therefore I look ahead and I say, what if she was to return permanently here, to what she describes as her home, our home, she says. I actually think a mother paid for the home and her late husband. So I think the daughter has maybe got her values incorrect. I can understand that they would think it that way, it's home to them. But after all, it's her late husband and her mother's home. And when I refer to this place, I describe where I live. I describe it as your mother's home. Again, not very happy to hear me say that, but that's the truth. And I see the future being somewhat difficult if she were to return, because it will certainly put pressure on the mother. And why should it? Her mother is doing what she feels is best for her future too. And this is the dilemma that many may well find here in the Philippines when a member of a family decides to come back home and live after living overseas for a long period of time. They will always feel that they're in a higher station, a higher level once they return, because they've been the one that's been sending money in some cases, not all. But they also hold a lot of strength within the family, and it's important that we recognize that. So it's another dimension, it's another issue that may well approach your lives if you have an older son or daughter living overseas who maybe don't take too kindly to you living with their mother. Maybe they, for some reason, feel that you're going to take over the house because maybe you're going to marry her. But, there's legal ways of putting their mind at rest that way. After all, we come in naked, we go out with borrowed clothes, and we get buried. We can't take anything with us except the coffin that we're in. Joke. But that's just my first return thought for the day. I'll get back to my tiling project to keep my mind active and to keep my sanity. Bye now.